All right, today we are diving into something that feels straight out of science fiction. Anduril's new military AR headset, EagleEye. But we're doing this a little differently. Instead of just giving you our take, we decided to run an experiment. We asked 12 of the world's most powerful AIs to analyze it for us. Let's get into what they revealed. So, this is the big question, right? What happens when you point a dozen different synthetic minds at a new piece of military tech? This isn't just about the weapon itself. It's really an experiment to see how AI thinks about something so complex and with such high stakes. We're basically taking a look inside the machine mind to see what it can tell us about our own future. We're going to break this down into 4 parts. First, we'll set the stage with the EagleEye experiment itself. Then we'll get into the universal AI consensus, the stuff that every single model agreed on. After that, things get really fascinating when the specialists enter the picture. And finally, we'll land on the human problem, the one thing the machines just couldn't tell us.
So first up, what exactly is this EagleEye system? Put simply, it's an augmented reality headset for soldiers. It's built by the defense tech powerhouse Anduril, and this is a big deal, in a major partnership with Meta. The whole idea is to fuse all this data from drones, from sensors, from the entire squad into one single display. You're basically giving soldiers a kind of battlefield superpower. And here is our panel of experts. We threw this exact same problem at a dozen of the most advanced AI models out there. You've got the big names and some really interesting newer ones. The key thing to remember is that each one has its own quirks, its own training, and, as we're about to see, its own analytical personality.
Okay, let's get to our first major finding. For all their differences, something incredible happened. A super clear consensus emerged across all 12 models. It's like they all independently zeroed in on the exact same 3 points, which gave us a really powerful baseline for understanding what makes EagleEye so important. First, every single AI agreed on this. EagleEye is a massive technological leap for what they call situational awareness. The ability to pull in data from a drone flying overhead, a sensor on the ground, and your squad mates, and overlay it all right onto your vision, well, that's seen as a huge operational advantage. It's just the next logical step after things like radar and night vision.
And this quote from Gemini just hits the nail on the head. See, the promise isn't just more information, it's smarter information. Right now, a soldier is juggling a radio, maybe a tablet, and what they can see with their own eyes. This integrates all of it. The real goal is to cut down that cognitive overload so they can make better decisions faster.
Now for the second point of total agreement. The one feature that was described as tagging human targets in real time, well, that set off massive red flags for every single model. It instantly became the gravitational center of the whole ethical debate. It brought up immediate and really tough questions about misidentification, about accountability, and of course, about the slippery slope toward fully autonomous weapons.
And the final thing they all agreed on? Meta's involvement. This isn't just a footnote. The AIs saw this as a landmark moment. It's a major strategic pivot that helps normalize this deep integration of big tech into the defense world. And let's be honest, it also gives Meta a very well-funded market for all that AR and VR research that's been kind of struggling to find a home with consumers.
Okay, so that consensus is our baseline. But honestly, the most valuable, the most interesting insights came from where the AIs started to disagree and specialize. It was fascinating to watch. They almost broke down into 3 distinct archetypes, or personalities, and each one brought a totally unique and crucial perspective to the table.
First up, we've got the granular technologist, and this role was played almost exclusively by one model, Kimi K2. While most of the other AIs were talking in these broad, sweeping concepts, Kimi showed up with the receipts. It came with hard numbers, specific component names, and verifiable data. It really moved the whole conversation from the abstract down to the concrete. Just look at the contrast here. It's pretty amazing. Other models would say something vague like, oh, it improves on previous systems. Kiger McKean-K comes back and says, yeah, it has a roughly 70-degree field of view compared to the 43 degrees on the old IVAS system. Others worried about countermeasures. Kiger pointed out that its specific waveguide glow can be detected by shortwave infrared cameras at over 300 meters. This is the kind of detail that really grounds the hype in reality.
Next up, we have a group I'm calling the Operational Realists. This group was mainly made up of Grok, GPT-5, and Claude Opus 4.1. And these models, they were not impressed by the slick marketing demos. They were completely focused on the brutal, messy realities of combat, and all the ways this fancy high-tech gear could go wrong out in the field.
They started asking these really tough practical questions. Things that sound simple, but are literally life or death. For instance, what happens when fine desert dust, which is everywhere in a lot of combat zones, gets into those super delicate optical waveguides?
Or this one, a classic problem. What happens when the battery dies 3 hours into a 12-hour patrol? All of a sudden, your incredible technological advantage becomes a heavy piece of dead weight on your head. They just kept hammering on these practical pain points.
And maybe the most critical question of all. What happens when a sophisticated enemy, and you have to assume you'll face one, uses electronic warfare to jam your network? Suddenly, the system's greatest strength, its connectivity, becomes its biggest vulnerability. It could actually leave a soldier worse off than they were with simpler, more rugged gear.
So our final group of specialists, we have the philosophical Inquirers. And this was primarily Gemini, Genspark, and interestingly, GPT-5 again, showing it can wear multiple hats. These models went a level deeper. They pushed beyond the immediate ethics of just targeting and started asking these profound second-order questions about how this technology changes the very nature of war, and even the identity of a soldier.
Gemini, for example, raised this huge alarm about the gamification of combat. When your enemies start appearing as just little digital icons on a screen, it creates a psychological distance. The big worry here is that this abstraction makes it easier to use lethal force, because the violence feels less real, less visceral.
And then GPT-5 came in with this absolutely profound anthropological insight. The argument is that a tool this powerful doesn't just help a soldier. It fundamentally redesigns what it even means to be a soldier. It starts to change the culture, the identity, and the very core of trust between humans and the AI they are now literally wearing on their face.
So, after all of this incredible analysis, from the deep technical specs to the real-world operational risks, all the way to this deep philosophy, we finally arrive at our last section, the human problem. And this is all about the one crucial thing that none of these 12 AIs could actually do.
And here it is, the critical point. Every single one of these models, no matter how clever or sophisticated, stayed safely inside the pre-existing boundaries of the conversation. Not one of them challenged the fundamental assumption of why this technology is being developed in the first place. Their analysis, as brilliant as it was still a reflection of the limits of their training data.
So what this whole experiment really reveals is a kind of tiered capability structure for AI analysis. At the base level, you've got competence summarization. All 12 models could do that pretty well. Then, you have a secondary tier of practical, domain-aware critique. Only some of the models, like the operational realists, could really pull that off. And then, at the very top, you have this rare tertiary ability for that deep, second-order philosophical thinking. It's almost like it mirrors the spectrum of human expertise.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. This experiment shows that machines are getting incredibly good at mapping the complex landscape of a new technology like EagleEye. They can show us the technical paths, they can highlight the ethical pitfalls, and they can point out the philosophical chasms. But the one thing they can't do is tell us which path we should take. That final responsibility, the judgment, the governance, the choice of where we as a society draw the line, that remains a fundamental and perhaps permanently human problem.